All right. Good evening. So here we are, session 23. First of all, I want to say thank you so much for joining us. 23 weeks in, and we have finally made it to a spot that is kind of an interesting thing. We're going to try and cover the entire book of Leviticus. Tonight. The entire book of Leviticus. Now, there are some options that a person has when going over the book of Leviticus. One of those options is to take it like verse by verse and try to break down what's going on. And we are not going to do that. That would take us so long. And there's a lot of details. What we want to do tonight is we want to take kind of a 20 to 30,000 foot view of Leviticus and what's going on to help us to have a better perspective so that the next time we choose to read back through it, we don't get lost in, oh my word, what in the world is... Like, we get lost so much in the details.
What does Leviticus mean?
What does it mean?
Mm-hmm. Is it the law? Is that what it is?
Leviticus is law. Yes, it is the book of the law.
Well, that's all I was trying to prompt you to say. Yeah.
The third option, I would say, to Leviticus is just skip over it altogether and ignore it. But if we do that...
You missed some good stuff.
We are missing out on some really, really good stuff that we're going to try to give you some perspective about today. There is so much here. And we want to start out... We have been doing reviews. If you want a review of where all we've been, that's fine. But we want to talk about the last few weeks, what has been kind of the central focus of what we've been talking about the last few weeks. There's a structure that has kind of been the center point of everything that we've been talking about the last couple of weeks. Can you tell me what that might be?
I just giggle because I'm thinking, I'm a horrible test taker, and you always ask me these questions, and I
There's a building.
Oh, the temple. Tabernacle.
Yes.
Tabernacle.
Temple's going to come in
Yeah.
2nd Chronicles. The tabernacle. And what did we talk about the experience at Sinai being?
A wedding ceremony.
Wedding ceremony. And we talked about if that is a wedding ceremony, what is the tabernacle? Do you remember the function of what happened in the marriage ceremony?
Is that the covenant?
It's the honeymoon suite.
Oh, the honeymoon suite. No, the covenant would come from the Lord.
Correct.
Yeah, no.
The covenant was the 2 tablets, the ketubah.
Yeah. No, why would it be the honeymoon suite?
Because it was the place where the people of God came to interact with God, get to know Him.
Got it.
Okay.
Like,
know.
I got it.
In the biblical sense, and there's a lot of blood involved.
When you get to know God, there's a lot of blood involved?
There is.
Well,
correct.
Yeah, but is that because of sacrifice?
Yeah, we're going to get there.
Okay, I'm like, why?
So, why is this important? And we have titled this lesson, What is a Priest?
We certainly have.
The reason we have entitled that this way is because this is the call of God. Let's read
Exodus 19.
Boom, there you go.
You said it was written on the board.
It is,
so
yes,
I looked and I found.
And she's going to conquer.
And I got
Here we go.
Okay, Exodus 19, 5 and 6.
That's right.
Now therefore, if you will indeed obey my voice and keep my covenant, then you shall be a special treasure to me above all people, for all the earth is mine, and you shall be to me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. These are the words which you shall speak to the children of Israel. Now
remember that term that is treasured possession, my special possession.
I remember you talking about it. I don't remember what the word is.
It's not a specific word. It is wedding speak. You are going to be mine.
We did, yeah.
A groom says that to their bride.
Right.
Hey, you're going to be my treasured possession. I'm going to call you my treasured possession, my special one, chosen from all the rest. You and me. That's it. This is what God is doing. And he's calling them to be what? In verse 6?
Priests.
You shall be, if you're going to follow this covenant, if you're going to follow along, you're going to be to me a
holy nation.
A kingdom of priests and a holy nation.
Part. Kingdom of priests, holy nation. Yeah.
A whole kingdom of priests, not just a kingdom with priests.
Kingdom of.
A kingdom of priests. This is different than a kingdom with priests.
That's correct, because that would title every single person.
Every single person.
And then in my never mind, that's not. My footnote says all peoples, but that is not the right verse. So never mind.
Good. Yeah. So God has an intention that this bride of his is going to entirely be made up of priests. So when they hear that for the first time, they obviously have priests in almost every ancient culture.
Yeah.
So what version of priest are they supposed to be? Like the priests of the Amorites?
Probably not.
Like the priests that they experienced in Egypt?
Probably not.
The priests of the Chaldeans? Like why, what should they, yes. So what is a kingdom of priests? So we're going to take a look at this book called Leviticus. And we're going to break it down by sections. Really what we're looking at in Leviticus is, what does it mean to be a priest? What does it mean to be a priest of this God? What does it look like? What does it mean? And so what do we find? Well, in order to come before a holy God, what is kind of important here?
Well, I mean, you got to be... Yeah, I'm like, you got to...
Yes,
purification. You got to be not yourself.
So section 1, which is chapters 1 through 7, is all about sacrifices. And we call that section the atonement section. So see that blank line?
Oh, yes.
You can write atonement right there. So section 1 is the section about atonement. This is all about sacrifices, all about sin offerings, grain offerings. What does that mean? It means in order to come to God, we need a clear conscience. Because if the call of God is to be holy because I'm holy, it's not to be perfect because I'm perfect, it's to be set apart because I'm set apart. In order to come to me, you're going to have a clear conscience. You're going to have to separate and wipe away these failures. Pretty similar to what we do now, right? If we're going to come before God, He invites us before Him, but He invites us to accept Him as our forgiveness. Yes, we need forgiveness. We are sinful by nature. And so what we see in chapters 1 through 7 is this process of atonement being laid out and the different ways about that. Then we get this.
So is this conscience like the sense of right and wrong?
Yeah, kind
of to be aware
of being righteous.
Because that's conscious. Conscience is like conscience.
Well, I just wrote that up there, not for everybody else, but
just
for me
to
know.
Well, and I'm looking at it, and I'm like, that's what I was looking at just now. So I'm just
science probably would be the
okay.
proper word there.
Because conscious is to be aware, but you should be aware.
Yes.
Clear awareness, if you look at it that way. That's why I'm asking. I just wanted some clarity there.
So then we have another kind of interesting. So what does it mean to be a priest in the very beginning here? As we read chapters 1 through 7 is not about a whole lot of do's and don'ts. It's really about, hey, if you're going to come to me, this is what it takes to be in right standing before me. This is the sacrifice. And so what you see, chapters 1 through 7, is a lot of the the sacrifice processes. And here's what's interesting about this. This is just the telling and the instructions of it. They're not even doing it yet.
Right. So burnt offering, grain offering,
Sin offering, peace offering, wave offering. Go ahead.
No, you got it.
It's not...
I was just reading them in order. Peace offering, sin offering, trespass offering, laws about the burnt offering, grain offering, and sin offering, and then laws about the trespass offering and the peace offerings.
And so it's all about atonement and being able to approach God. Then we come along to this second section, which is really two separate sections, and there's a section in between it. And this section is all about the priesthood. So you can write priesthood right there.
Yeah, I will.
And this is an additional set of rules. This is not the same as the laws about atonement. This is specifically about the priests and what it means to be a priest. What it means, like chapters 8, 9, and 10 are like, what can the priest do? What they can wear. Laws about like increased rules about their sexuality and how they deal with things. And interestingly enough, there's they call it a priest sandwich. So a priestwich. There's two different sides of this information about the priest and a section in the middle. And the second section about priesthood is chapters 21 and 22. And it's what happens when a priest messes up. What happens when they mess this thing up? As is very common in my own life. When I mess this thing up or respond wrongly in a specific situation and have to go back and be like, well, I shouldn't have yelled at you, mainly with my kids.
I was going to say, you never yell at me.
So this section is very, very important because we want to talk about in this section some different things that are going on that set apart, because God's call is to be set apart, to be different. To be different from all other people. Because He has displayed Himself how throughout the Scripture up to this point.
What do you mean?
How has God shown Himself compared to other gods up to this point?
I don't know. He's different.
He's very different.
Yeah.
Instead of being angry and insisting on a specific way, He is patient. He's kind. He's loving. He's trying to guide His people back.
Right.
He's encouraging them to trust creation, not to fight against it. Like there's so much that's different about it. And this act of, hey, this is how you find atonement is vastly different from all other religious viewpoints, because every other religious viewpoint, even today, you never know. Mm-hmm. Outside of Christianity and Judaism, you do not know whether you are in right standing with that God or not.
Yeah.
Until it's all over. And so here we are. You know what it takes for atonement. You know what it takes for having a clear conscience and standing before God and knowing that you're righteous. And now He's calling you to these instructions about priesthood. And so what does that mean? What are the roles of a priest? I would say the first one is the instruction about how do we put God on display. So when you hear that statement, putting God on display, what does that mean to you?
Well, that phrase, make much of God, comes to mind. Like just making much of who He is, always pointing back to Him. And
that's what's really intriguing about what God's call is here, what His instructions are here. He constantly is telling the people of God and the people of Israel, hey, here's the deal. I'm your one and only. You need to remove all the other idols, and the central focus needs to be me. Once He gives them the tabernacle, where is it in terms of how He aligns the people in their organization as they wander through the desert for the next 40 or so years? It's in the dead center. In most other places, it's like, this is the temple, it's on the outside of town, or this is the place that we go to, it's kind of out here because we don't want our God. If our God does get angry, we don't want to be consumed by it. But God says, put me right in the center because you do want to be consumed by my presence. You do want to be consumed by my love and mercy and grace because that's what's overwhelming. Yes, he wants to be surrounded by his bride. He wants to be known. And this is a really interesting thing. And I think we touched on it a few weeks ago. If you have a monotheistic worldview, if there is a single God, and he is a creator and was intelligent in his design, what does it demand? It demands relationship. It demands you getting to know them. In a polytheistic world, if you prefer one God over another, you're making one mad.
Yes. Now that you're saying that, I remember
Speaks
that
of chaos
right.
and confusion and all these wars, but God isn't like that. See, our pursuit of a one true God is to put order to the chaos and to give relationship where there is distance.
Well, there's no competition.
Right, that's the call of God.
Yeah.
And so he wants us to have a relationship with him that's very public so that the actions that we have put God on display, and because he's what makes us different from all other people. He's what is making these people different from all other people, is that he is God. And the priest is putting God on display because he is a guide. As the second part, he is a guide because they understand the process of atonement. A priest is now a guide to guide other people through the process of atonement. Why would this be important? People without a guide definitely lose focus. Are you a carpenter?
No.
So if you're going to do a carpentry project that you are not an expert at, what do you need close by to help you through it?
Expert.
You need an expert. Hey.
I knew I'd get you to say that.
An expert. You need a carpenter close by.
Right. Or lots of resources.
Or you need those resources that are going to help you through that process. YouTube has kind of eliminated some of these things, but get too deep in a YouTube video that you have no business knowing, or you really don't know what you're doing and you're trying to duplicate it, you can mess some stuff up.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Guaranteed. But here's the priesthood is about helping other people navigate through that atonement process. Because a priest is supposed to be an expert on the process of atonement. The sacrifices, the clearing of the conscience, the process of forgiveness and reconciliation in a relationship with God. A priest is supposed to be an expert at that. So a person who's not an expert brings their sacrifice and says, hey, I need to make atonement for my sin. This is the sacrifice I brought. They've got to be able to go, okay, this isn't the right sacrifice. Go back home and go get this. This is the proper sacrifice to meet this sin offering. Then when you get back, I'm going to talk you through all this process because you're going to participate with me at the altar. This is the call of God. This is the action of these people. This is the call of Leviticus. A person who is offering an offering as a sin offering or a grain offering or peace offering, any of these things, they are participants at the altar of sacrifice, and they are guided through it by a priest. Man, if we could really get this. Anyway, and they're guided through that process of atonement by a priest. That's what the priesthood does. The next thing is really, really interesting because not only are they guiding people through this action of atonement, there's something else that's commanded of them every day in this atonement process. If you have sin, if you're in need of peace and you bring these specific offerings, those are happening. But twice a day, the priests are making offerings to God on behalf of the people. And so their role is to intercede on behalf of others. What does that mean? I got to say this. When I remember this, I was a teenager, and I was working at a camp, and this guy was preaching about interceding. And he had a helper who was like, intercede for my mother. And he had like this cup, and he took this seed and he planted it in this cup. Is that what he's talking about? Is that interceding?
No.
Okay.
Like, what are you saying right now?
It's way off the wall, but I still remember it.
Yeah. No, that is no. I mean, that seed is entering, I guess, but that's not the same enter. No, to be the go-between.
To be the go-between.
Yeah.
So what does that mean? Like, explain that a little bit more to me.
Well, personally, when I intercede for someone, it's taking their situation and bringing it before the Lord. And
that's awesome. Yeah.
So saying, Lord, I'm coming to you on behalf of so-and-so. And sometimes they are still willing to pray or able to pray. And sometimes they've been in a situation where they're out of energy and out of words. And you say, I'm going to intercede on your behalf. So right. I'm going to pick up the mantle and bring that situation before the Lord.
So if it's me, you're taking my need to God on my behalf.
Right.
What about the other way around?
God bringing something to me to give to someone else?
Correct. Ooh. See, this is a two-way street that we miss.
Ooh.
This is a two-way street that we miss. The role of the priest is to take what is God's and take it to others, and to take what is others and carry it and place it before God. That's what intercession is. It is a two-way street. It operates both directions. And so when the role of the priest is to intercede on behalf of others, they're making a sacrifice every morning and every evening, like clockwork, for any random sin or peace offering necessary between any sojourner, foreigner, anybody in the land, and bringing their name and their atonement before God. So that if they walk in unknowingly, they are covered. And at the same time, they are getting to know the Word of God, so that if a sojourner, an unrepentant, or someone unknowingly walks into the presence of God and asks for something, they're not out of line, and the priest is prepared to take the information that God has given them to know Him and hand it over to the others, the sojourner, those who are lowly, those who are weak, those who are without. It's quite a mind-blowing thing. They are interceding on behalf of God into the lives of others. This is a call of God of priesthood. The last one is crazy, because we make excuses for why not this one. The last role of the priesthood is to distribute resources to those in need. In God's law, in His instruction, He has no expectation of the poor and the needy and those who are without. But we kind of talked about this on Sunday, right? God is a God of what? More than enough. He is a provider. And what He says to His people in this law is He tells them, hey, I'm going to bless you, and I'm going to give you more than enough. And if you have a little bit more than enough, I want you to bring that excess and surrender it to me and to my house. And if you have a lot of excess, I want you to bring a bigger portion of your excess and put it before me and put it in my house. Now, part of that excess, part of that offering that's going to come is going to be to make sure that the house functions. Another part of that excess that you bring to God is going to make sure that the priests who are committed to my work are able to make a living. And then all of the rest of it is to be available for anybody who's in need. That's why the book of Malachi says, don't forsake giving your tithe and bringing it to the storehouse. Why? So that there would be bread. Like, you're like, well, there is bread. There's the Word of God. No. Physical, literal bread. So that anyone who's in need has what they need. God has always been about caring for those who are less than. Like He provided for the wayward and the sojourners and whoever might randomly walk in to the presence of God by having the priests offer sacrifices twice a day. Whether anybody was in the temple or not, they were making sacrifices. In the tabernacle or not, they were making sacrifices on the altar of incense so that there was, or on the altar, on the brazen altar, on the bronze altar. So there was constantly fire there, and there was constantly work of atonement, which is, again, really, really heavy. But this is the act of the priesthood. This is the 4 functions of what it means to be a priest. They're so different.
Yeah.
They're so different. They dress differently. At this point, you could look at the high priest wardrobe, and you're like, "Well, that's kind of different." It's got this big blue covering and this breastplate that has 12 jewels in it and this big turban, and he's got a belt, and he's got to get all of this on and walk out in front of the people. Remember, we're in the desert.
Yeah.
Is that like
awesome?
Something that you're like, you know what? I should add 2 extra layers of clothing and an extra big hat. I'm going to go walk around in the desert. This is a good time. No.
That's where I would play.
Absolutely not. But this is what God says. He wants us to look differently and act differently from everybody else on the earth. And the point is Him.
Mm-hmm.
The central focus is Him. And so that's the priesthood. That's the priest sandwich talked about in chapters 8 through 10 and 21 and 22. Then in the middle of this section, anything you want to add to that?
No, go ahead.
In the middle of this section is section 3. It's chapters 11 through 20. And it's quite an interesting piece. This section is about how to live as a priest.
So this is, I mean, you're saying as a priest, but they're really just saying for all the people. For how the people should live.
How the people of Israel should live, yes.
Right, because you're saying, I know, I'm circling back to that, just reiterating the point of we're all called. He calls everyone to being a priest. So not just the priest and what we think of, again, going back to everyone.
Everyone, yeah.
Yeah.
Yes,
right.
Not a house for priests, not a house with priests.
But a house of priests. We should be putting God on display, helping people navigate their atonement, interceding on behalf of others. We should be distributing resources to those in need. I just want to, so yes, I do want to add to that. I want to say, yes.
This is us.
This is us.
We're going to come back to that. Section 3, how to live as a priest. You want to write that in there?
All those words?
How to live as a priest.
That's a lot of words.
Section 3, chapters 11 through 20 are going to give us what is kosher. It's going to give us the kosher diet. What kind of clothing is acceptable. What's acceptable sexual practices and sexuality. This is quite literally the call to be different. This is the clearest call and instruction in all of what is going on in Leviticus to what does it look like to be different? how to live as a priest. What food is acceptable. Why you don't eat certain birds of prey. Why they don't eat scorpions and spiders. Why they don't eat pig. Which, if it's raised on a farm and stuff, is pretty good. But there's reasons why. There's explanations here of... And there's not really a whole lot of explanation of why. It's really just instructions. And I know there's a lot of people who'll be like, well, it's basic instructions before leaving earth. That's what the Bible means, right? Is that right? Right? But that's not really true. Yes, absolutely. You need a drink? Got you back. That's not really accurate. The Bible is not basic instructions before leaving earth. I mean, you're going to leave this earth one way or another. And I mean, if we really want to get down to it, you should take a look back at our Revelations series. You're only going to leave if you're in a relationship with God. You're only going to leave earth temporarily, according to the book of Revelation. Take that for what it's worth. So this Leviticus is kind of an owner's manual to the tabernacle. Now that we have this honeymoon suite, what do we do with it? How do we function in it? Why are we allowed even the opportunity to be in the presence of God? Well, this is what it is. This section 3 is really important about, this is what you do at the tabernacle. This is the type of people who are allowed to come in there. This is how you meet the requirements of being one of those people that are able to be in there. But it's not like everybody else. I mean, I'll continue to refer you back to the garments of the priests. And then we find ourselves to section 4. Is there anything you want to add to that quickly?
No.
Not quickly?
No.
Doesn't
You're
matter.
good.
Then we find ourselves in chapter 23 and 24. We find ourselves understanding these moad. This is where God says, hey, there's going to be some specific times that I want you to take a break. And section 4 is a how-to party. Maybe you've never heard that term used before. Section 4 in the book of Leviticus, in chapters 23 and 24, these are the feasts and the festivals and the celebrations. Now there's one that's a solemn day, Yom Kippur. All the rest are understanding, hey, it's okay to take a break. It's okay in certain seasons to splurge. It's okay and even good for you to celebrate. See, we as how-to party. Thank you. This is my scribe for the night. We as the American church especially, this is a place where we really struggle. How to party. How to party in a godly way. I can't tell you how many times while I was in high school, maybe you heard the same thing, about why partying was so bad. Why we should avoid it. Why we shouldn't be there. And now, for clarity's sake, there's a lot of bad. Like, there's no reason that adolescents and college students have of running amok and having alcohol and stuff. This is not what this is.
Well, I think that's part of the problem is what we associate with party.
Correct.
And I think it's about changing the narrative.
What would happen if we as churches had a reason to party that wasn't the Super Bowl?
Don't we, though?
You know what I mean? Like,
Right,
what
yeah.
would happen if we took reasons to celebrate and have parties and celebrations and reasons for getting together and having a good time responsibly,
Right.
without it being a worldly occasion?
Yeah.
Because these parties, these celebrations, these festivals, these feasts that are described in these couple of chapters, they're not normal for the rest of the world. It is still a focus of putting God on display and being different from everybody else. They would go gather grain for part of their harvest, and they would stop and come and make a grain offering and a wave offering and a celebration to God, and then they'd go back out and finish harvesting. That's not normal.
Right.
But that's what God called them to. He said, before you count all the stuff that's yours, that I've blessed you with, stop and make sure that you recognize me and celebrate what I've done for you. Then go back and collect the rest.
I think it's, like, as you're saying that, I think part of why it gets lost is because how do you translate that to what is now? You know?
Yeah.
Because it's not like we're going out to the field and harvesting some stuff and then bringing it back. And, you know, what does that actually look like? How do you translate that to, I go to the office and I'm a bookkeeper? And so, you know what I'm saying? So,
Yeah.
like, when you're bringing it home, like, how do you...
We're going to get there.
Oh, good. I'm excited.
Like, it's very important, though, for us. It's very important for us to understand it's okay to celebrate.
Yeah.
It's okay to party. It's okay to take a break from time to time and just be in the presence of good people and in the presence of God.
Yeah.
We don't have to always be working. Anyway, there's seasons.
That message is for someone else and not me.
There's seasons. Moad. Take a break. That term is seasons. These sacred seasons. These sacred breaks. Sacred feasts. All right, and then this last section, 25, 26, and 27, chapters 25, 26, 27. How do we care for the oppressed? Caring for the oppressed. Mm-hmm. OPPRESSED. Caring for the oppressed. God has always focused, and I said this earlier, but God has always had a focus for those who were hurting. Remember, we talked about the Zedeka that stirs the heart of God. The cry of the oppressed, the cry of the hurting, the cry of the lost and the needy. See, if God is a God of more than enough, then His desire is not to leave people with less than enough. His desire is that those who have more than enough would set aside some so that they could give to them. This is where we talked about this term this last Sunday from the book of Amos, Zedeka. This is where the Zedeka Box comes in. The Zedeka is the offering set aside for the poor and the needy. And so they would have these Zedeka boxes that they would put resources into, so when they found someone who is oppressed and needy, that they were there for them.
Is that like what the benevolence box is for some places?
For some places, yeah, it'd be like a benevolence type of deal.
Or it makes me think about Robin Hood and the Little Church Mouse, and they say that's for the, oh, you know what I'm talking about? And the sheriff comes in and he robs from it. The alms, yeah, for the poor.
And here's the thing about this caring for the oppressed. By the time we get to this point, this is hey, you know what's right. You know my relationship with you. This is how you restore those who are broken and needy and hurt. See, if we really look at this, there's this strange thing that's right in the middle of this massive chiasm that is the book of Leviticus. One thing that's completely out of place. See, in chapters 1 through 7, God talks to us and to His people about redemption. Because that's the point of atonement. It is redemption. And the process of redemption. Well, what we see at the end here in chapters 25 or really like 23 through 27 is redemption. But the first redemption is about redeeming yourself. The second redemption is about redeeming the seasons, redeeming your activity, and redeeming others. He follows that function of redemption early on with this information about a priesthood. And his focus is, how do you live as a priest? What is different for a priest? And the second set down here, really that falls right here in this chiasm in section, what would be
21 and 22.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When he's talking about priesthood, he's talking about if a priest gets off the rails, how to reconcile, how to draw someone who's called to be a priest, who has had failures in their life, how to reconcile them and bring them back. And then in chapters 11 through 15, how to live as a priest. In this section here, chapters 11 through 15 talk about holiness. They talk about what it looks like to be holy and set apart. Well, chapter 17 through 20 also talks about holiness and what it looks like. But this holiness is focused on reconciliation and the holiness code of what happens if you've messed up. What does it take? And here's what's really interesting. This whole section of atonement and priesthood and what it looks like in the holiness code, what we see is a lot of blood. Chelsea, can you tell us really quickly what is the direction of this blood in these sacrifices? Do you know what the direction of the blood is?
I don't know what you mean by direction, so no.
What direction does the blood happen? Where's the animal killed?
Outside.
Outside. And where does it go first? Where does whatever portion that's supposed to be offered go? It goes on the bronze altar first.
Okay. I don't remember all of this.
And the blood is thrown where? It's either rubbed on the horns of the altar or thrown on the side of the altar. And then the pieces of it that are set aside to be holy go where?
I honestly don't know.
They go towards the presence of God, and they're washed in the water, and they're carried into the tabernacle.
Okay.
Those parts that are set aside for God. So the blood goes which direction?
Toward.
From outside, heading in.
Yeah.
We're gathering a lot of blood going one direction, aren't we?
Yeah.
Smack dab in the middle of this whole thing is something that makes no sense at all to be there. Do you know what it is?
I'm assuming chapter 16.
Chapter 16. Dead in the center.
Yeah.
Speaks of one day.
Day of Atonement.
The Day of Atonement.
I don't know if you want me to say it. Sorry.
And here's what's interesting, that if you don't understand what's going on here, we get lost in all the details and we miss exactly what's going on here. Do you understand what's happening on the Day of Atonement? The Day of Atonement, the blood flows the opposite direction.
Back out.
The offering is made. They take 2 goats. And they cast lots, and the lots fall on one of them, and they take that goat, and they take it in to the tabernacle, and it's killed in the tabernacle, and there's a bull that is also sacrificed in the tabernacle, and interestingly enough, there's only one person in the tabernacle. One. Nobody else is allowed to be there. There's one person there, and this is the only day they enter the Holy of Holies. And they take a goat and a bull with them, and they sacrifice both of them right there. And the blood from the bull that's sacrificed as a sin offering is sprinkled on, it's rubbed on the mercy seat and on the horns of the altar, and it is thrown on the side of the mercy seat 7 times. And then in the same way, the goat is killed, and the blood is sprinkled on the mercy seat and sprinkled on the side of that altar 7 times. Then the blood is carried out to the scapegoat. And that blood is sprinkled on the scapegoat, and the sins of the people are confessed over the scapegoat, and he is taken out, handed to someone, and led off into the wilderness for the sins of the people to be removed.
Yeah.
The blood flows the opposite direction in the middle of this happening. In the middle of this giant chiasm, the focus of God is this one section that sits right in the middle that doesn't make any sense at all to be there. He's talking to them how to live as a priest, and in the middle of that, he's like, oh yeah, there's another sacrifice, and here it's going to go dead center of this book. Almost messed this up. And it's the Day of Atonement. It is the act of God, the book of Isaiah says, of separating the sins of the people as far as the east is from the west. Not the sin being blood that's flowing into the altar and building up the sin, this blood of the sin that's building up and building up and building up, and this place being full, like this tabernacle being full of the people's sins. Now it's going to be in the middle of this, and it's on the 7th month in the 10th day of the year, which is not July 10th, by the way. That's not what that looks like. But in the Jewish calendar, it's in the 7th month on the 10th day of the year, and it is a specific holy day, a solemn day, that God is removing the sins of His people from gathering in the same place, and He's taking blood and forcing it out of town, not to be remembered again. This is what God is doing. This is what God is doing, and the focus of what God is doing to say that His people are different from all the other people in the world. And it's easy for us to go, that's cool, that's great Old Testament information. But there is another great young Jewish man, I say great, questionable at the beginning, found his way to be a very, very, very important person in the history of the church. And let me tell you what he says. You're like, what? Yeah, let me tell you what he says. He says that they stumble because they disobey the word as they were destined to do. But you are a chosen race, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, a people for His own possession, that you may proclaim the excellencies of Him who called you out of darkness and into His marvelous light. This is the declaration of Peter.
I feel like that hits a little different hearing this first. Because you preached on that when we were youth pastors for weeks and weeks and weeks.
Long time ago.
I mean, just years ago. And I mean, just kept driving it home. And it meant a lot then, because we are a royal priesthood, a holy nation, set apart for His own possession. All of those words are huge anyway. But then to put it here,
Because it is clearly a call back to Exodus chapter 19. It says, "Now therefore, if you will indeed obey my voice and keep my covenant, you shall be my treasured possession among all the peoples. For all the earth is mine. And you shall be to me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. These are the words that you shall speak to the people of Israel." It's about more than Israel. So if God has called us to be a holy nation and a kingdom of priests, then we have to come back to this section on priesthood and examine ourselves. Are we doing the work in our own life of putting God on display? Or if we were in a lineup, what is it about us in a lineup with a bunch of pretty good people who live close by here? What is it about us that would be different? Is there anything about us that would put God on display openly? Different from random
Good people.
good people born and raised in the Bible Belt?
Right.
Are we helping people navigate through their atonement process? Are we interceding on behalf of others? Are we distributing resources to those in need? This is a great place for us to wrap this up. This is absolutely vital for us to recognize that if this is where we are, if this is who God has called us to be, then we need to be examining our role and our call to be priests. If you didn't know that before, you need to know that. We get so focused, I think, as a church and as Christians on you need to be saved, you need to be saved, you need to be saved, you need to be saved. But then what does that mean? What's next? Well, the call of God is for us to be priests. Same thing that was happening here, yes? The call of God, He delivered His people, literally had them born again, brings them out into the middle of nowhere and says, "I want to have a special relationship with you." And they say, "Great, let's have a special relationship. We accept you. We receive you." And He immediately goes into this instruction of, this is what that means. This is how you use that relationship. This is how that relationship makes you different from all the other people of the world. And it's because you are a kingdom completely comprised of priests. And Peter echoes it in 1 Peter chapter 2, into verse 8 and really verse 9. That you are a royal priesthood. You're a chosen people, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, a people for His own possession. That's who we are. And it has its roots right here. Because God is the same yesterday, today, and forever. And His heart is the same for us. We've seen this echoed throughout all of the first 3 books of the Bible now. If you're watching online, you should be here. We'd love to have you. At 10:30 on Sunday morning, we're going to be back at it again, declaring the Word of God and gathering together. So hopefully you can come and join us. Have a great day.